If somebody was twerking in the front of the king? Annyeong, everyone! For music, we have BTS. For movies, we have Parasite. So what's the hottest Korean drama abroad? I'm sure some of you know of a historical zombie drama. It's the Netflix original Kingdom. Kingdom is about zombies. Why did Kingdom succeed when there are already so many zombie-themed dramas and movies? Maybe it's because having zombies in the olden day of Korea brings out something new and fresh. The crude scenes of zombies running in straw shoes against the bows and knives in times when there were no cars, no guns, and no electricity. The background of this era, which played a part in the success of Kingdom, is the old Korean Joseon Dynasty. Maybe when you watch Kingdom, you have felt curious about the culture of the Joseon Dynasty. Why are they all wearing hats? Why do all people lie face down when they see the main character and shout, "Jo-ha"? Today, I'd like to introduce you to the Joseon Dynasty culture that will shock you just as much as the zombies did. No Filter K-Ranking Chart. Top 3 shocking cultures of Joseon Dynasty from Netflix Kingdom. Number 3 is the hats. The people who saw Kingdom were so fascinated by the Joseon Dynasty hats that they said Kingdom is a story about zombies and really cool hats. A dazzling display of hats that have never been seen before kept appearing like a fashion collection. Whether at home, in the palace, eating food, or even fighting with zombies, people always wore those fancy items. You can't help to fall in love with it. You probably admired these hats even more when you found out that these hats were called gat in those days. Oh my god. During the Joseon Dynasty, hats came in different sizes, shapes, and colors, depending on the person's social status, location, and purposes. Of course, ordinary people wore a simple rough bamboo hat. On the other hand, for aristocrats, there were all different kinds of hats. Look at Hak-ju. At home, he wore a 정자권 that looks like a 3-tiered cake. Outside, he wore a classic-style hunip, and in the palace, he wore a formal samo. His hats kept changing like a chameleon. But what's even more interesting is that the Joseon people never cut their hair until they died. It was because they believed they couldn't cut the precious hair of their parents that had given to them. It was a time when people couldn't wash their hair very often, so their hair was full of lice and smell was incredible. Maybe the Joseon people were being polite by using their hats to cover up their embarrassing hair. Manner maketh God, shall we say? Number 2 is the Penal Culture. If you saw Kingdom, you would have seen a scene of criminals in wearing wooden boards on their heads. It's called kal. It was a kind of shackle that made the criminals uncomfortable. Kal was used for criminals who committed serious crimes, but the size and weight were different depending on the nature of the crime. The criminal could not lie down and had to stay sitting all the time. Maybe it was meant to make them regret their crimes all night long. There was also a way to torture criminals called 줄이틀기. Criminals were tied up into chairs and 2 hockey stick-like wooden poles were put between their legs. The sticks were pulled apart from either side until it hurt so much that the criminal confessed. In several cases, the bone broke and the bone marrow popped out. If it was me, I probably would have told the truth as soon as they touched my legs. The most common punishment was taehyung. Taehyung is butt spanking. It's a very basic technique. The nature of the crime determined the size of the lash and the number of whips. The maximum was 100 lashes. Just like counting sheep before falling asleep, the criminals would have passed out before counting all the lashes. During the Joseon Dynasty, the highest penalty was the death penalty. There were quite a variety of execution methods, from decapitation to more severe cases where criminals had their heads, arms, and even legs torn apart in a punishment called 능지도참. To me, the most impressive method was saya. It was death by drinking poison by tea. They say that it was the most honorable way to be executed. The criminal would bow and drink the poison because it was a gift from the king. The last tea the criminal would taste before leaving this world. I wonder what taste that poison would have. Number 1 is the king of Joseon Dynasty. What would you do if you could go back in time to the Joseon Dynasty and meet the king? You're going to say, "Hey king," and hug him and blow a kiss? Well, if you want to end your life, I highly recommend you to do that. If you do, you'll probably be... The king of Joseon Dynasty can be seen as a god. He was the father of the people, a leader, and an absolute being. If the king said spaghetti was tastier than pizza, it was so. If he said he made the sun in the sky, it would be considered his invention. You saw people bowing before the main character, right? If you saw the king, you had to prone to the floor in the Joseon Dynasty. It was because they wouldn't dare to look at him. They never even dreamed of eye contact. They weren't even allowed to show their backsides. So when they left the rooms with the king inside, they had to walk backwards. In those days, if somebody was twerking in the front of the king, maybe they had to drink poison instead of water after dancing. There were countless people assisting the king, but I'd like to introduce you to the 3 most shocking roles. Number 1 is the eunuch. It was the man who would manage the chores close to the king, but they had to be castrated. The reason is that all the women who work in the palace are considered to be the women of the king, so the eunuch was not meant to have indecent desires. Number 2 is the kimi sangung, a food taster. She would taste the food before the king ate it and determine whether it was poisonous or not. It's a security measure against poisoning from those who want to usurp the king. It's shocking they use people like lab mice. Number 3 is the Bugi Sangung, a court physician, but this person's job was to check the king's poo. I think it would have been better if he had done it himself. But I don't think it's nice for the king to make other people do that. Can you imagine what life a king in the Joseon Dynasty was like? So far, we looked at the top 3 shocking cultures of Joseon Dynasty from Netflix Kingdom. This was a dynasty that existed in Korea until only 200 years ago. If you compare it now, it feels strange. Now, there is no royal family and people don't wear different hats every day. But once you know that Korea came from this culture, Korea will feel different. If you have anything you want to know about Korea, leave us a comment, because we'll give you the unique information you can't find anywhere else. Those who leave comments, we're going to pick the best comment and give away a surprise gift to one lucky winner. So please leave comments and any feedback you'd like to this channel. And lastly, don't forget to hit the like button. Okay, annyeong! Yeah.